Today we're going to talk about comprehending sarcasm in Winnie the Pooh. Winnie the Pooh is one of the many children's books that appeals to both children and adults. There are certain types of sarcasm, punning, and creative spelling by Christopher Robin and the animal characters in the novel that are humorous to both children and adults. These forms of comedy are recognized by people at various levels of print literacy. However, Winnie the Pooh is rich in visual print jokes. These jokes are only fully understood by a reader that can comprehend the alphabetic code and the graphemes of the printed English language. Sarcasm is very hard for many learners, especially English language learners. Now let's take a look at sarcasm versus irony. Irony is the use of words to express something other than, and especially the opposite of, the literal meaning of the sentence. Sarcasm is having a bitter, caustic tone, usually directed against an individual. Sarcasm can be thought of an instance of irony that involves an emotional aspect. So if we were to take a look at a few examples, an example of sarcasm would be when something bad happens and your reaction would be to say something like, "Great, that's terrific. My day is just awesome. That's what I needed. Terrific." That's an example of sarcasm. And an example of irony would be a fire station burning down. So what can create sarcasm? The distinctive quality of sarcasm is presented in the spoken word and manifested chiefly by vocal inflection. So sarcasm is an insincere form of politeness which is used to offend. Sarcasm has three aspects: linguistic, social, and emotional. Each has been proven to be difficult for child readers. Studies suggest that sarcasm and irony continue to be an interpretive problem in both speech and text for adults as well. Prosody. Context and prosody are the main cues native English speakers rely on to detect and interpret sarcasm. The prosody a speaker uses is one factor that can impact the interpretation of their message. Prosody is the timing, rhythm, and intonation of speech. So let's take a look at sarcasm in Winnie the Pooh. This is an example of Rabbit's use of sarcasm.
Pooh was not the sort to give up easily. When he put his mind to honey, he stuck to it. Now, honey rhymes with bunny, and bunny rhymes with,
Rabbit? Yeah, and I like Rabbit because he uses short, easy words like, "How about lunch?" and "Help yourself, Pooh."
Ooh, lunch? Oh no, not again. Oh my goodness gracious.
Is anybody at home? What I said was, is anybody at home?
No,
Bother. Isn't there anybody here at all?
nobody.
Somebody there. Because somebody must have said nobody. Come, isn't that you?
No,
But isn't that the rabbit's voice?
I don't think so. It isn't meant to be.
Hello.
Okay. So sarcasm here is working in two frames. One contains the desired social situation, and the other is a response that comes across as play rather than a sincere and expected social response. Rabbit knows that the appropriate response to Pooh's question would be to acknowledge that, yes, he is home. Rabbit's comic response is not an answer, but sarcasm, complicating the assumed response of a social situation such as greeting a friend at the door. This example violates the maximum of quality. Make your contribution one that is true rather than false. Here's an example of Eeyore's use of sarcasm.
pathetic. Just as I thought. No better from this side. Nobody minds. Nobody cares. Pathetic.
Eeyore, what's the matter?
What makes you think anything's the matter?
You seem so sad.
Why should I be sad? It's my birthday, the happiest day of the year.
Your birthday?
Of course, can't you see all the presents?
No.
Can't you see the cake, the candles, the pink sugar?
No.
Neither can I.
Oh. Well, many happy returns of the day, Eeyore.
Thank you, Pooh. But we can't all. And some of
Okay, we see here that Eeyore relies heavily on sarcasm. Not only is Eeyore making a joke, but he gives a great example of sarcasm. A social event as a birthday party celebration is expected, but it is not there. Acknowledging that they could imagine the framework of the social custom in Eeyore's expectations of a party. This violates the maximum of quality. Speaker says something that is not true. Here's another example of Eeyore's sarcasm taken from the book. Eeyore was very glad to stop thinking for a little bit in order to say, "How do you do?" "And how are you?" said Winnie the Pooh. Eeyore shook his head from side to side. "Not very how," he said. "I don't seem to have felt at all how for a long time." "Dear, dear," said Pooh, "I'm sorry about that. Let's have a look at you." So Eeyore stood there, gazing sadly at the ground. "Why, what's happened to your tail?" he said in surprise. "What has happened to it?" said Eeyore. "It isn't there." "Are you sure?" "Well, either a tail is there or it isn't. You can't make a mistake about it, and yours isn't there." "Then what is?" "Nothing." This invokes the nonsensical logic that is related to sarcasm that can confuse readers. Now, in Eeyore's case, we see another script for eliciting sympathy through sarcasm. However, the effect is achieved by using an abstract linguistic category, the interrogative, to represent states of being rather than structure a predictable question and answer pragmatic occurrence, making this an extremely complicated use of sarcasm, marking a character's emotional state. This violates the maxim of relevance. Make your contributions relevant. So context is always challenging to readers, and speech acts and indirect messages are complicated to interpret for young readers, especially ELL. Research focuses upon children's problems with recognizing the context, the implicature, the breaking of the maximum of quality, and sarcastic communication. And pragmatics of emotion is also very complicated to understand. So some strategies to help. Class discussions focusing on the character's intent when using sarcasm would aid young readers who struggle with contextual interpretations of blame, attribution, and sympathy elicitation or sarcasm in context in general. Doing so provides an inlet into advancing readers' emotional literacy as applied to the text they read, which in turn increases their emotional literacy, reading skills, and contextualization of communicational or behavioral incongruence. Some other strategies to help ELL students are to provide lots of examples, demonstrations, exercises, and discussions. Overemphasizing words should be stressed in order to convey sarcasm. Find and show a picture of anonymous people and then demonstrate how sarcastic comments can be made. Teach students how to deliver sarcasm. That should be coupled with instructions and advice on how to recognize it as well. You could give tips that if the speaker is saying something the opposite of what he or she means, or if the speaker's tone of voice rises or falls, or certain words are stressed. Those are all strategies that could help ELL students.